saw the legendary fin disappear into a magical doorway with the rock face here at the Giant's Causeway.
Ireland is filled with ancient ruins, forgotten tunnels, and stories people stopped questioning long ago. But recently, a tourist with a camera drone went up over the Giant's Causeway at dawn, looking for a pretty shot for his social media account. He came back down with 11 seconds of footage that should not exist. A slab of basalt the size of a garage door slid open by itself, and then sealed shut without leaving a single crack in the stone. And honestly, that was only the beginning of what they found. The Giant's Causeway sits on the north coast of County Antrim in Northern Ireland, and if you have never been there, I want you to picture it for a second, because the place itself is part of the story. On around 40,000 basalt columns rise straight out of the sea in these tight hexagonal shapes that look almost too perfect to be natural. And the official explanation, the one geologists have agreed on for over 3 centuries now, is that all of this formed roughly 60 million years ago when massive volcanic eruptions covered the area in lava. And the lava cooled into those columns we see today. That is the science. And the science is real. But the local story, the one passed down in this part of Antrim for centuries, is a little stranger than what the audio guide tells you. It says a giant named Finn McCool built the causeway stone by stone to cross the sea and fight a Scottish rival. And most tourists hear that legend, take their photos, buy the postcards, and go home thinking it was a charming Irish folktale. I have heard it myself, and I will be honest with you, I always thought it was just a cute story for the kids on the bus. What nobody tells the tourists is that the Irish language name for the place is older than the Finn McCool legend by quite a bit. The older name translates roughly to the stepping stones of the Fomorians, and that detail right there is the one that should make you sit up. Because the Fomorians, in pre-Christian Irish belief, were not friendly storybook giants who built bridges across the sea. They were a primordial race of beings who were said to live under the sea and inside the earth, and they were defeated by another race of gods called the Tuatha De Danann. According to the oldest versions of the story, they were not killed in battle. They were sealed away. That is the part that gets you, because most cultures, when they want to write off an old religion, they kill the old gods off in the new mythology and move on. The Irish did something stranger and a lot more uncomfortable. They put their old gods underground and locked the door behind them, and they told their grandchildren about it for 1,000 years. The man who launched the drone that morning was not thinking about any of this, of course. He was a Belgian tourist named Lucas Vermeer. He was on holiday with his camera kit, and he wanted aerial footage of the columns from a higher angle for his travel page. Standard stuff. The drone went up, climbed above the cliff, and started its sweep along the formation, and the early footage is exactly what you would expect. Tourists scattered across the rocks below in bright jackets. Hexagonal pillars stretching toward the water. Beautiful. Unstandard. Nothing you would not see on 100 other travel videos shot at the same spot. And then a section of the rock started to move. I want to be careful with my words here, because the difference matters. It did not crack. It did not crumble. It moved. A recessed cluster of columns near the base of the formation pivoted outward in one smooth, controlled motion, the way a heavy door swings on a hinge that somebody had oiled the day before. The motion was deliberate. It was precise. And it was completely silent, which is maybe the part that unsettles me the most, because a rock that moves is supposed to make a sound when it moves, and this rock did not. The drone caught all of it, every frame. 11 seconds of something the science textbook does not have a chapter for. A National Trust ranger named Thomas Brennan was standing about 40 meters away when it happened. And Brennan is not the kind of man who exaggerates. He has worked that stretch of cliff for more than 10 years. He has seen a lot of weather, a lot of strange tourists, a lot of unusual things, and none of it has ever shaken him until that morning. He grabbed his radio and tried to call it in, but his hands were shaking so badly that he dropped the radio twice before he could get a transmission through. His exact words to dispatch, the words that crackled across the channel that morning, were that the rock had opened outward, smooth and controlled, and that it looked like the mountain was exhaling. You hear a sentence like that, and your brain tries to find a category for it, and there is not one. And because that is not the language of a man describing geology. That is the language of a man describing something alive. 3 other witnesses on the ground confirmed what Brennan saw. The slab held open for 11 seconds, and then it slid back into the cliff face and sealed itself shut. No crack, no seam, no visible gap of any kind. The rock looked completely solid again, like the slab had never separated at all. And if you had not been holding the drone footage in your hand, you would not have believed it had ever happened. Before the stone moved, at least 4 people on the ground reported hearing a sound coming from deep inside the rock. 4 separate witnesses, who did not know each other, who were standing in different parts of the formation, who described it independently the same way. A low rhythmic pulsing, slow and steady. I'd like breathing. People hear strange things on cliff faces all the time. Wind through sea caves can sound like almost anything if you are tired enough or scared enough. And you are right to be skeptical. But you have to understand something about the Antrim coast before you write this off, because there are 19th century travel accounts from this exact stretch of coastline that describe the inhabitants of cottages a mile inland having their sleep interrupted on winter nights by what they called the subterranean sounds of the caves. Local people have been hearing this for at least 200 years, and probably a lot longer than that. It was always written off as wind through sea caves, acoustic resonance, nothing supernatural. But what the witnesses described that morning was not wind. Wind does not have a rhythm, and wind does not breathe in and breathe out at a steady pace. When the investigators pulled Vermeer's footage and examined it frame by frame, every single time stamp was intact. There were no edits or digital artifacts of any kind. The footage was clean. Whatever happened that morning, the camera saw it exactly the way the human eyes on the ground saw it. And that is the moment this stops being a viral curiosity on the internet and starts being something else entirely. Within 48 hours of the footage going public, a sonar team was on site. The official cover story was a routine environmental survey, and that is what the press release said, but anybody paying attention knew exactly what they were really there for. The lead technician was a man named Declan Foley, and Foley is the kind of person you want on a job like this. And because he has 14 years of subsurface imaging experience behind him, he has run scans on shipwrecks in the North Sea, archaeological sites in the Middle East, and oil platforms in the North Atlantic. And in all those years, he had never once filed an unusual reading. He brought 3 different types of equipment with him to the Causeway, because the rule in his field is that you never trust a single method on a structure this old. You triangulate, and only when all 3 independent readings agree do you start writing your report. What they found behind the wall changed everything Foley thought he knew about basalt. The ground-penetrating radar returned a coherent geometric void, about 11 meters below the lower causeway, 14 meters wide, 6 meters deep, 3.2 meters tall. Already, that is a problem. Because volcanic basalt does not naturally form rectangular voids of that size, but the chamber itself was only the start of what the equipment was telling them. Inside that hollow space, the sonar detected several tall, narrow, upright forms. They were standing in a line, evenly spaced and perfectly still. Their proportions were humanoid, with shoulders, with what looked like torsos, with what appeared to be heads. but their height exceeded 8 feet, far beyond any known human population, ancient or modern. Foley said something to his supervisor that night that the supervisor wrote down word for word in his field log, because he wanted to make sure nobody could later claim he was making this up. He said real cooled lava chambers do not put bodies on shelves. He said geometry does not grow inside basalt by accident. And the geologist they brought in to verify the readings was a woman named Margaret Sullivan from Queen's University, Belfast, and Sullivan has spent 16 years studying the igneous geology of the Antrim coast. She is not a person who jumps to conclusions, and she is not a person who entertains paranormal theories. Her first response on seeing the cross-section was to demand they rerun the entire scan at a different frequency before anyone in the room said a single word about chambers or figures or anything else. They reran it 3 times that day. Different equipment each time, different settings, different angles of approach. The figures showed up every single time, in the same positions, at the same heights, with the same spacing. And here is where Sullivan stopped being a skeptic. I think this is the moment in the story that should make you stop scrolling. Because basalt does not form around objects in upright positions unless those objects were already standing when the lava poured around them. That is just how molten rock works. It engulfs whatever shape it finds. If something is lying down, it cools around something lying down. If something is standing, it cools around something standing. These figures were standing, which means whatever they were, they did not fall over. They did not run away when the lava came. They stood in place, evenly spaced like soldiers waiting for an order that never came, and they let 60-million-year-old molten rock engulf them where they stood. Now this is the part where I want you to actually stay with me, because the easy reaction is to call all of this a hoax. I'd walk away from the story and never think about it again. But before you do that, you need to know something about volcanology that almost nobody outside the field talks about in plain English. And I think once you hear it, this story is going to feel different to you. Pompeii is real, and most of what you think you know about it is wrong. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 of the Common Era, it killed roughly 1,000 people in the city of Pompeii.
On August 24th, 79 AD, the city of Pompeii was entombed by a massive eruption from Mount Vesuvius.
The image most of us have in our heads is people huddled on the floor, slowly suffocating in ash, dying the kind of slow, horrible death you see in disaster movies. That image is wrong. Most of those bodies were preserved in upright positions, not lying down, not curled up on the floor, standing, sitting up, reaching for things. Frozen mid-motion, and in the exact pose they were in when the wave hit them. A volcanologist at the Vesuvius Observatory in Naples named Giuseppe Mastrolorenzo led a study published in the year 2010 that overturned everything we thought we knew about how those people died. The previous theory, the one in the textbooks, was that they suffocated slowly in falling ash. Mastrolorenzo proved that the theory was wrong. He showed that the temperatures from the pyroclastic surge reached 300 degrees Celsius and higher, and that the people of Pompeii did not suffocate at all. They died in a fraction of a second from heat shock. Their bodies froze instantly in whatever position they happened to be in when the wave of superheated air hit them. His exact words in the published study were that there was no time to suffocate, and the contorted postures of the Pompeii dead were not the effects of a long agony. They were the effects of cadaveric spasm caused by heat shock on living bodies in the moment of death. That sentence should sit with you for a moment because of what it actually means. Volcanic material can lock a human shape into stone in the time it takes you to blink your eyes. We have known this for over 160 years. We have plaster casts of the Pompeii dead in museums all over the world. Children visit them on school trips, and stand a foot away from them and never think about what they are actually looking at. So the question at the Causeway is not whether the rock could hold something inside it. The science already says yes, with documented physical evidence in cases anybody can go visit on a Tuesday afternoon. The question is, what happens to that something while the rock is holding it for 60 million years instead of 2,000? Ireland is not the only place where this kind of thing keeps showing up, and once you start looking, the pattern becomes a lot harder to dismiss. In southern Turkey, on a cliff face above a small town called Demro, there is an ancient Lycian necropolis at a site called Myra.
Today I'm at the old Lycian city of Myra. Lots of history here to take a look at this beautiful site.
More than 100 tombs were carved into sheer rock over 2,000 years ago, and the lead archaeologist on the modern excavation is a Turkish professor named Nevzat Çevik, who has been running the dig since the year 2009. Çevik calls Myra the Pompeii of Anatolia, and he has said publicly that there is an incredible buried history sitting 10 meters below the modern ground level, and that we have only seen a fraction of what is actually there. One of the tombs at Myra contains an inscription carved by a man named Hertueti, and the inscription is a curse against anyone who violates the burial. It says, "The Lycian gods will punish anyone who buries another body above his." That curse has been carved into that rock face for over 2,000 years, and people still do not violate the tomb today. In Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, the longest cave system on Earth.
The park features the longest cave system in the world with over 400 miles of caves that they're continuously adding to as they explore more.
At over 420 miles of mapped passages, indigenous mummies have been found that are thousands of years old. Some of them were positioned as though they had knelt down and chosen to die in the darkness rather than try to leave. One of them, a man the archaeologists called Lost John, was discovered in 1935, and radiocarbon dating placed him at about 445 years before the Common Era. Park rangers reburied him at an undisclosed location inside the cave system in the 1970s. To this day, only one living person knows where he is. In Egypt, in 2017, a team of physicists from Japan, France, and Egypt called Scan Pyramids announced they had used cosmic ray particles to find a hidden chamber inside the Great Pyramid of Giza.
About a recent discovery, hidden chamber, located deep inside the walls of the Great Pyramid of Giza.
They published the discovery in the journal Nature, which is one of the most respected scientific publications on the planet.
The Grand Gallery. This is the Grand Gallery. The most fascinating structure on Earth.
The chamber was 30 meters long, sitting above the Grand Gallery, completely sealed, and unknown to every Egyptologist in history until the muon detectors caught it. The pattern across all of these sites is the same, and it is unsettling once you see it laid out like this. Something inside the rock that should not be there. Something old. Something the official record cannot account for. And in every single case, the people who study these places professionally end up using language that sounds nothing like science. Çevik calls Myra a buried world. Mastro Lorenzo calls Pompeii a frozen city. Sullivan, after the third sonar pass at the Causeway, told her colleague she could no longer find a geological explanation for what she was seeing. When the geologists run out of geology, the story is no longer geology. That is what I keep coming back to. The sensors that the original investigation team installed in the rock face at the Causeway were never removed when the team packed up. They are still transmitting data right now, today, as you watch this. And an environmental monitoring specialist named Eilis Maguire, who works for the Northern Ireland Department for Infrastructure, was assigned to review 3 months of continuous sensor data. And what she found in that data was not routine and was not boring. The breathing pattern that the original sonar team flagged is still there. It is still rhythmic, and it is getting faster. The interval between the pulses has shortened by close to 12% over a 6-month period. Whatever is producing that vibration is not slowing down with time. It is speeding up. McGuire also found 3 separate occasions where the vibration intensity spiked dramatically over the baseline. And this is the part of her report that I want you to really hear. Each spike corresponded exactly with a time when human beings were physically present near the restricted section of the cliff. The first spike happened when 2 maintenance workers approached to check the rope barrier. The second happened during a routine nighttime equipment check. The third was logged on a morning when a small group of tourists wandered past the boundary before staff turned them back. Every single time someone got close to that section of the cliff, the rock responded, "That is not a passive geological phenomenon. Geological phenomena do not react to who is in the room." McGuire used a single word in her field report that her colleagues said she had never used in 15 years of working together professionally. She called the chamber aware, a vibration pattern sealed inside 60-million-year-old volcanic rock that gets faster and stronger when human beings approach. A rhythm that has been increasing in tempo for half a year of continuous monitoring. A stone door that opened once on camera, and may have opened a dozen more times when nobody was filming. A folklore tradition local to that exact stretch of coastline has been telling people for 1,000 years that something is sealed inside the basalt and waiting for the right moment to come out. The locals who live near the Causeway, the ones who walk those cliffs at dawn before the tour buses arrive, do not talk about Finn McCool the way the tourist brochures do. They talk about him the way you talk about something you are not entirely sure is still asleep. Some of them say they have heard the breathing themselves on quiet nights when the wind drops and the sea goes still, always from the same section of the cliff, always from behind the stone that moved on the morning the drone was filming. 3 weeks ago, a fisherman who anchored his boat near the base of the eastern cliff face reported hearing something he described as slow, heavy breathing rising from the rocks just above the waterline. He said it sounded close to him. He said it sounded patient. He pulled his anchor up that night and left the area, and he has not returned to that fishing spot since. The sensors are still active. The data is still streaming back to monitoring stations. The intervals between the pulses continue to shorten with every passing week. Whatever is behind that door, whatever the science cannot quite name, it has been waiting patiently inside that rock for 60 million years. The folklore says it is waking up because the world is breaking apart. The geologists say they cannot explain what they are seeing on their instruments. The fisherman says he is not going back to the place where he heard it. And the door, as of last week, is no longer flush against the cliff face. There is a hairline gap visible in the basalt at first light every morning. A man could fit 2 fingers into the opening now. What do you think is really happening behind that door? Drop your theory in the comments below. If this story stayed with you the way it stayed with me, share it with someone who needs to hear it.